Have you ever had a conversation at work with someone of the opposite gender and felt like you were discussing completely different things? Have you ever walked away from that discussion confused by the person's reaction? There's a good explanation as to why this can occur. When having a conversation with the opposite gender, you may be talking about the same things, but each hoping to achieve a different outcome. It's important to understand the differences so you can avoid confusion, be more productive in the workplace, and become a more effective communicator. Because the truth is, men and women actually have different purposes for communication. Although, according to a 2013 article from Toastmasters, men's typical speech patterns are necessary in some situations, while women's speech patterns are just as essential in others. If we as speakers can employ the best of both styles, then we can be successful communicators. So, understanding gender differences in communication can actually help you achieve desirable outcomes both in work and personal areas. So, I'll be spending a few minutes to tell you about the differences in how men and women communicate. My discussion today will focus on three areas: how men communicate, how women communicate, and what we can learn from each other. So let's begin by discussing, how do men communicate? Men use language to exert dominance and achieve tangible outcomes. This communication style can help explain why men are seen as more commanding than women. Not only are men perceived as more commanding, but they're also more dominating in conversation. They are more direct and assertive and participate in something called ritual opposition. This is more commonly known as playing the devil's advocate. It's simply a way to challenge other people's ideas and continue a discussion, but to women, it can seem very combative. According to Stephanie Saul, in an article written for the New York Times in July of 2019, men also tend to dominate in group conversation, often through interruption. Soraya Chamali, in an article for the website Role Reboot, states that in mixed gender groups, men speak 75% more often than women. Men need to be aware of whether or not they are shutting down communication of their female colleagues who have valuable input but may not feel comfortable interrupting a man to have her opinion heard, or simply may never be given the chance to speak. So now that we know a little bit about the ways that men communicate, let's examine women's communication styles in the workplace. While men use language to exert dominance, women use language to enhance social connections and create relationships, according to Karina Merchant in her 2012 essay, How Men and Women Differ. For women, the process of communication is valued. Overall, this explains why women are seen as less confrontational and assertive. According to the article mentioned earlier from Toastmasters, women also tend to use questioning tones more often than men. This is known as uptalk, where the voice trails off at the end of a sentence. This can be mistaken for a lack of confidence or even a lack of understanding when women are speaking. Teal Burrell also wrote in their 2018 Post Magazine article that men and women both interrupted women more often than they did men, meaning this isn't explicitly an issue across gender lines. Assertiveness can be perceived negatively in women, with others considering them controlling or aggressive. Women are also acculturated to tend to downplay their contributions, while men are trained to exaggerate theirs. This can lead to men repeating a woman's idea and receiving praise for it, an action so common that the word heap-eating was coined to describe it. Women also differ highly from men in their body language. Two men speaking will angle their bodies slightly, while two women will stand in a more squared up position, a stance, when exhibited by males, that most perceive as confrontational, wrote Carol Kinsey Goman in her 2016 Forbes article. She continues, women display more warm body language cues. They are more likely to focus on those who are speaking by orienting head and torso towards participants. They lean forward, synchronize their movements with others, tilt their head, and smile. As you can see, these widely different methods of communication can cause confusion and block collaboration in the workplace. So, what can we learn from each other? According to Carol Kinsey Goman in her 2016 article in Forbes magazine, In all cases, a communication style turns into a weakness when overdone. A female's collaborative approach can come across as submissive, and a male's directness can be taken as callousness. In the appropriate context, both communication styles are effective. And so, to ensure success in communication, we both have work to do. Men must be aware of when they're dominating in conversation. They need to encourage their female colleagues to speak up, and they need to learn to ask questions to clarify their colleagues' intentions in communication. Women also need to learn their weaknesses in communication, and they need to be more assertive when speaking. They need to phrase their solutions as a statement and not a question. They need to note when they are interrupted and request that they be allowed to finish. In other words, they need to be their own advocate. By understanding the differences in how men and women communicate, you can ensure that you hear and understand colleagues of the opposite gender, as well as utilizing the most effective communication tactics. Sheryl Sandberg, a celebrated author, said in her 2013 book, Lean In: Women, Work, and the Will to Lead, instead of ignoring our differences, we need to learn to accept and transcend them. Only then can we communicate effectively across gender lines. Thank you.